So we have Robert Gallardo here, who has he is a California native, if I'm not mistaken, but he has been living in Honduras since, is it 1993, Robert?
Yep.
Great. And he is the expert there on butterflies, birds, everything you could hope to see. And I'm going to let him take it away to talk about his upcoming Honduras tour next year. And we're really happy to have him on right now. So Robert, whenever you're ready.
All right, Jesse, thank you. Thank you very much. So I see people still logging on, but we're going to get started anyways. It's an honor to be here speaking in front of everybody. I know we have people from all over the US, might even be people there from other countries. So as Jesse mentioned, we do have one scheduled tour for Honduras with Naturalist Journeys. And we can touch on that in a little bit later on. But Honduras is one of these countries where there's very, very little known still in terms of the wildlife and nature tourism. And what I've been focusing on here for the past 31 years is learning a lot of the flora and fauna, finding ways to author and then self-publish numerous books, and to get these books out to the rest of the world so people can see all the good things that are here in the country. Because a lot of times you just hear a lot of bad press and a lot of bad stigmas in Honduras, Banana Republic, etc. But there's a lot of beautiful things here to see, a very safe place to travel to and to visit. And as we do, we explore across the country still doing research work. So basically this presentation is going to summarize about 3 decades of conservation and research and tourism work here in the country, and how did we get to the point where we could offer some wonderful trips to see the birds and the butterflies, a little bit of everything. Of course, we have the Mayan ruins and their reefs, famous reefs off the north coast as well. So this is going to be a summary of about 3 decades of work. So as many of you, we all have our humble beginnings as sometimes very little kids. We're influenced by grandparents or our parents and sometimes friends. So I as well had my beginnings in nature as a little kid. So you can see there in the 2 pictures, that's me with a butterfly net. I actually got started in butterflies long before birds, at about the age of 10. So skipping way past the 10-year-old stage, I knew I wanted to do something as a career working in the outdoors or with wildlife or museum or park ranger. And so I went to school and graduated from Humboldt State University with a degree in natural resources planning and interpretation. And right before I was going to graduate, I heard about Peace Corps, and I thought it'd be a fascinating experience to do something overseas. It really interested me. And so the country that was offered first was Honduras. I grew up in Southern California with his food, beans and rice. So I said, it can't be that much different than living in Southern California. Well, yeah. So I went into Honduras as a Peace Corps volunteer from 1993 to 1996. I worked with a national park, had a Honduran counterpart, and taught them a lot about migratory birds. We did some work in the park with a government agency here. You really couldn't do much. And then I moved to another site and extended for a 3rd year, where I helped the community open a butterfly rearing program. And we had an agreement with the San Diego Wild Animal Park, and they were to buy the pupa from this actual farm. And this was in remote eastern Honduras. And within 14 months, the whole farm was built. The people were trained, and they were exporting pupa to the Wild Animal Park. So it was a really rewarding 3 years of Peace Corps. So right after Peace Corps, I went back to Honduras, thinking I could also etch out a living by rearing butterflies and exporting, and couldn't. Sad story, but regardless, I'm still here. So let's go to the next slide. So Honduras is about 43,000 square miles. You can see where it's located. Most people are familiar with the country of Costa Rica and Panama, which is south of us. And so Honduras is the second largest country in Central America. Nicaragua is the largest country. Again, those 43,000 square miles is about the size of the state of Tennessee, just roughly so you know how big it is. Next. So one thing that Honduras is not really well known for, but it's actually a very crucial overwintering and stopover point for an untold number of millions and millions of birds that all leave North America and that are on their way to Central America. Many of the birds overwinter in Central America, and then some skip through and keep continuing on to South America. So for example, the vast majority of migratory warblers that come out of North America either overwinter or pass through Honduras. We have huge tracts of cloud forest and pine oak forest and rainforest where a lot of these migratory warblers overwinter. So for example, warbler species in Honduras, I think we have 54 species in all. And a good part of those are migratory species. So a lot of the species from the western North America, like especially Townsend's warbler and hermit warblers and some of the red-faced warblers, their typical wintering range ends up in western Honduras, and that's it. So if they're found anywhere south of that, that's a really rare occurrence. And a lot of birds from eastern North America, east of the Rockies, overwinter in more lowland rainforest habitats in the country. And then you get all the shorebirds. The shorebird fallout or phenomenon in the southern wetlands in Honduras is absolutely spectacular. Tens of thousands of shorebirds and waders of all different kinds of species down there. It's a real incredible sight to see. And we're going to show you just real briefly, some of the ecosystems of Honduras. As I mentioned, Honduras has a little bit of everything. So when people think about the tropics, they think it's all rainforest, but that's far from the truth, especially here in Honduras. So if anybody has ever gotten a copy of my bird book, in the back there's a pull-out map and it folds out. And on one side of it, it has a rough diagram of the major ecosystems in Honduras, all color-coded. So if you can see some of the code, some of the real dark green areas are a lot of pine and pine oak forest. So a lot of people don't think, wow, there's pine oak forest here. Yes, it's a huge ecosystem in the country. And some areas are pure pine. There's some areas that are just more oak, but then a lot of mixture. And if you look way over to the right side of the screen, the big kind of olive green areas, those are actually pine grass savannas. It's lowland Caribbean pine, kind of like the Florida Everglades. So between Honduras and Nicaragua, and there's some little pieces up in the Yucatan, this habitat alone is 6,000 square kilometers. It is a gigantic area. So I mentioned there's some famous snorkeling and diving along the north coast. Honduras is part of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef System, which is, after Australia, it's the next biggest reef system in the world. It extends from Yucatan all the way to Belize and to northern Honduras. And so there are three major islands just off the north coast. Very special birds there too. And I had mentioned the wetlands down south. So Honduras has just a little bit of coastline along the Pacific Ocean. It's not much, but there are a lot of estuaries, a lot of mangrove forests down there, a lot of tidal wetlands, vernal wetlands as well. And it's just not uncommon to go out there and see at least 200 species of birds a day. You can see a dozen or more jabberoos in one reserve alone, and thousands of shorebirds. I mean, everything from phalaropes and all these birds, lots, and they mix in with all the resident wetland waterfowl too, the wood storks and the roseate spoonbills. It's a really, really great place. So this is the pine savanna that's in eastern Honduras that I just mentioned. This big area with these big, tall, lanky Caribbean pines. And Honduras is the only known place, and it may occur in Nicaragua as well, but this is a place where the scarlet macaws actually nest inside pine trees. So most people think the macaws only live in broadleaf or rainforest habitats. In many places they do, but in Honduras they also live in these Caribbean pines. And the biggest nest protection program for macaws is here in eastern Honduras. There's an American vet who's been working out there for quite a few years, turned poachers, former poachers, into park guards now. And they now have about 100 nests, I believe, under protection, and about 100% success rate of birds actually fledging into the wild. Before, there was almost 100% loss because they were being trafficked out into the Caribbean. So a good success story. But we also do have a lot of rainforest. So rainforest goes anywhere from sea level up into the mountains as high as now 9,000 feet. We just kind of separated out from lowland rainforest to mid elevation to cloud forest or montane forest in the upper elevations. So this is a shot of one of the biggest national parks along the north coast. And this is a fascinating place because this is the only place in Central America where there's contiguous rainforest from sea level to over 8,500 feet. There is not a single place in Central America where you can see this phenomenon anymore. And so there's, during my years of study, we documented about 25 species of birds, I think it is, that undergo altitudinal migration, species that live in the cloud forest, and they migrate down slope to sea level in the winter. And this included the resplendent quetzal. So you can imagine seeing quetzals in lowland rainforest, highland guans, chlorospingus, and hummingbirds that usually have to go way, way up into the mountains to see, but you find them at sea level in the winter. So it's a real fascinating place, and lovely cotingas here, all three species of hawk eagles. Wonderful place. So cloud forest, again, is a type of rainforest. There's usually less rain, there's colder conditions, there's less biodiversity in general, but you get more specialized birds. So in northern Central America, we get species that you will not find south of Honduras, like blue-throated motmot, wine-throated motmot, wine-throated hummingbird, mountain gem, different species of mountain gems, different thrushes. So our cloud forests in central and western Honduras are more associated with Guatemala and southern Mexico. So there's a group of birds there that are the northern Mesoamerican endemics, and a lot of those are highland species. And of course, we have resplendent quetzal. It's probably never been proven scientifically, but we probably have more quetzals than Costa Rica and Guatemala combined. Quetzals are everywhere in the country. They're very, very common. They're found in almost every department in the country as well. They're just not famous here like they are elsewhere. Our subspecies has a tail that's longer than the one found in the south. Not that you can really tell the difference in the field. So those long tail feathers are almost 3 feet in length. Again, I mentioned the mangrove forest in the south, also along the Caribbean coast, very long east to west shoreline in the Caribbean, and there's some gigantic mangrove forest in there. So the reason why they get so big there, because we rarely take direct hits from hurricanes. So Belize and Yucatan, they're north-south facing, they get a lot of the brunt from hurricanes, and so the mangroves get hit most of the time. But most of the time the hurricanes sweep past us, and so some of these mangrove forests are gigantic. And there's a couple of places where we can take people in by boats and see agami heron and boat builds and many different species of kingfishers. So this is where we live, Lake Yahoa. I think it's 35 square kilometers, the surface area. It's the only large body of fresh water in the country. We are surrounded by two national parks. One's a cloud forest on the west, then there's another mountain on the east. It's a little bit lower, a lot of rainforest. And in the middle, there's this big basin. It's not a volcanic caldera, but the actions were formed by volcanoes over 100,000 years ago. And so we have all these huge freshwater wetlands around there, and almost every species of crake and rail found in the country are found here at the lake. Snail kites are very common here as well. I did a count many years ago because I wanted to know how many snail kites we had. They were just so common. We counted 604 in one day. That's a lot of snail kites. So they're feeding on the big apple snails as well. And so what thing that's really surprising to people is that we have these dry forests that kind of look like southern Arizona. So you remember that first picture, that big mountain range with forest that goes from sea level up to almost 9,000 feet. Well, on the backside is this huge rain shadow valley. And so by the time you spill over the backside, less rain hits those forests. It starts to get drier. There's pine oak forest. You get lower down, there's deciduous broadleaf forest. And then when you finally get into the floor of this big valley, it turns into a desert with barrel cacti, all different species of Nopales cacti, columnar cacti. Almost every single plant there is xerophytic. This is a shot that was taken in the rainy season, so things look really green. The endemic Honduran emerald hummingbird lives there and other places as well. Lesser roadrunner, a type of wren, which at one point we thought might have been a different species altogether, and it's not. So these are very, very, very special places. This is one of the most endangered habitats in the country. We can kind of boast about, in terms of the bird world, is that Honduras has more motmots than any country. So they believe that this group of birds originated in this part of Central America. So you can go to the north or to the south of us in other countries. A lot of countries have 6 species, but we have 7 species and should have an 8th species of motmot in the country. So things like the rufous motmot and the lessons are really common to the south of us. Broadbilled are common, but when you get up here, we get blue-throated motmot in the cloud forest. That's a very special bird. Keelbill motmot, which might be hard to see in other countries, is very common here. Turquoise brow motmots are very, very common as well. So a great group of birds. Everybody loves motmots. Next. And I mentioned our endemic Honduran emerald. We only have one endemic bird, and it's this hummingbird. In the past, it was listed as critically endangered, and they thought maybe it was on its way to extinction because only found in 1 or 2 isolated places. But as more people got into bird watching, more people started seeing these things elsewhere in the country and in different habitats, not so much as the xerophytic habitat, but in dry pine oak and dry forest. So they found all these populations, and now they seem to be almost not everywhere, but they're not critically endangered anymore. Next. So when I first came to Honduras, there was in 1993, there was only 701 species of birds officially documented for the country. At one point, and I think it was around the year 2000, a lot of this stuff kind of evolutioned really, really quickly. I was still trying to find my way in life, trying to figure out how I could stay in Honduras. And a friend of mine got me into this, you just say guiding gig. So I remember somebody there mentioning the Hocotoco antpitta. The person who discovered that was Robert Ridgely. He authored The Birds of Panama and did a lot of work in Ecuador and stuff. But anyways, he was going to come down to Honduras when he used to be on the board for a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. And so they needed a bird watching guide, and there was no guides in the country. And so a friend of mine, he said, Rob, we need a guide to show these people some of the birds around Pico Bonito, that beautiful rainforest that I showed you. And I go, Afito, I don't know that much. There's no books for the country. And he goes, it doesn't matter. We need somebody. And so that's when I was introduced, not only to Robert Risley, but the actual world of bird watching, because they don't teach you these things in school, but I never really realized that people actually pay to go watch birds. That's not what I studied. And it was at that point that I saw an opportunity that was there for the taking, obviously. But obviously I had a lot that I needed to learn. There was no book for the country. So there was an old monograph. You can see a picture there. It was done in the 60s, and it was a book done that detailed all the skins that were taken out of Honduras over about 120-year period. So some 20,000 birds were taken by collectors and sent off to museums around the world. So this guy went and visited all museums and listed all these things in the book. So it was a good reference, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So anyways, I had to use books from North America, for Panama, Mexico, and Costa Rica to be able to identify all the birds that occurred in Honduras. So I liken Honduras as the Darien Gap of Northern Central America. Each country has a certain amount of overlap between its flora and fauna, and obviously Panama has one of the biggest overlaps because it's connected to South America. Well, at least with the birds and butterflies, I have basically proven that this part of Central America is also an incredible melding pot for North America, at least Northern South America, and then the rest of Central America. So in birds alone, it's about 120 bird species that end their typical northern or southern resident or wintering ranges in Honduras. Now with butterflies, I think we're almost up to 200 species already that end their northern and southern ranges here in the country. So starting to do a lot of field work in a place where there very little was done, and I was paying for all of this out of my pocket as I was starting to do a little more guiding work. And in some cases, I showed you that real remote area in eastern Honduras. This required doing real big field expeditions, probably some like they did in the older days. Sometimes we boated into places and hiked way out into the rainforest, or flew in and then made our way deep into the forest. And with local guides, we would set up camps just like the one you can see there in the picture, and maybe would stay there for a week or so, and every day we would go out where we could in different directions and carry out field work. So just the eastern part of the country, that remote area, it was about a total of 30 trips in all. So very, very costly place to go to. But we call that the Little Amazon of Central America because it is a huge wilderness full of great green macaws and jaguars and scarlet macaws and tapirs. It's a huge, huge area. So kept doing more and more field work. And I was still in touch with Robert Ridgely, and he came down and helped out a couple of times. We did a couple like fundraising trips together. And he said, if you really, really want to learn the birds, one real crucial way is to learn the sounds that they make. So we all think of bird songs. Yeah, a lot of the birds do sing, but there's so many other different kinds of vocalizations that the birds emit. And so this equipment you can see me holding there on the right side, Sennheiser microphone. And back then there was nothing digital yet. It was a cassette recorder, a Sony cassette recorder, and that thing was heavy. So to be packing that thing all day long, day after day, you really get a sore shoulder. But I ended up recording hundreds and hundreds of bird sounds for a period of about 6 years. And I was able to really just, ingrain all these hundreds and hundreds of sounds into my head because I was recording them, and I just hit stop, rewind, play. And obviously the bird would come in. And so it was easy to relate the bird sound with the bird itself. And after so many years, I did a CD, The Bird Sounds of Honduras. So now we're getting into probably about 15 years of field work. I was able to document 40 country records. I think it's 41 now. Throughout the country, half of those came from eastern Honduras, this really remote area. So on one trip we did in 2003 into an area right along the Nicaraguan border, right in our base camp, on the very first morning, we had 3 country records. We had a striped-breasted wren, a black-throated wren, and great jacamar. The great jacamar was a pretty considerable range extension at that time. And the other 20 country records came from different places, including a lot of migratory shorebirds down in the south as well. The one in the upper right-hand corner, some of you may recognize, that's a black rail. We found a breeding population in eastern Honduras, and it's probably Nicaragua, in these pine savannas that nobody ever knew about. That was one of the biggest finds we had during all the years of research. And at that very same moment, I was with Andrew Vallely, who did the Birds of Central America with Princeton, and with the local villagers. They were able to catch one. Won't go into those details, but that photo got published in a journal. So a lot of great birds we found, a lot of running around chasing all these country records. So not only was I documenting all these country records, but species, according to the monograph, were very, very rare birds, like green rufous kingfisher, which is only found out east, wine-throated hummingbird, which is actually real common.
You raised your hand.
In cloud forest. Gray-throated Beckard, the one that just showed up, I think, in Texas not too long ago. Crested eagles. Also, all these birds that were considered rare ended up finding that a lot of these were fairly common in their appropriate habitats now that a lot of these places are more accessible than they were way back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So this all gaining momentum, all the bird watching stuff. I had a friend in USAID here in Honduras, and I approached them and I asked for some help, and along with some other people, said, let's do a bird watching event. And we did in 2009. The first bird watching event lasted 3 weeks. And we brought guides in from Mexico and Nicaragua because there were no bird guides anywhere. And so just a lot of budding bird watchers here in Honduras, and a lot of enthusiasm. So it was a great way to kickstart the bird watching here in the country. So we're gaining more momentum. We have a lot more budding bird watchers. USAID was really interested in the conservation economic impact of bird watching itself. And so they started funding bird guide training courses. This was something pretty novice in the region, let alone for Honduras. And we ended up developing a kind of a 2-tier bird guide training program, a beginner's course that lasted 10 to 12 days. And then most of those students went on to an advanced course that was 3 modules built on a road trip. They learned how to do itineraries. They learned how to do the actual budgets for the itineraries and how to develop a whole bird watching package. And so they did a lot of homework. They worked as teams. There were a lot of tests. They had to learn bird sounds. These were pretty intense courses, and there was a total of 6 courses. Some of the students had excelled in these courses, and some are even guiding internationally now. So it was a very, very successful program. So finally, after all this years of field work and learning the birds, going out around the country, where other people now adding to the country list, I figured it was time to do our own book. We really needed to have our own book. So you can see there in the lower left that it was shot in September 2011. I had a little table at the Ohio Birding Symposium, Midwest Birding Symposium, and that's where I met John Sill. He's a pretty renowned artist, a second-generation artist and bird illustrator. He had a painting of a snowcap hummingbird in flight. I actually bought it. Just fell in love with his work. I asked him if he would like to do a bird guide with me, Birds of Honduras. And he said he loved it. It sounded like a great idea and a great project. So at the same event, I walked around. I found a stand where there was a publisher who was known to publish bird guides, and asked if they were interested in supporting this project that John and I wanted to take on. And basically just shot down right then and there. And the person said that this project was too small for them. So I'm sure that may happen frequently in this world, but I was not taking no for an answer. And I forged forward with John and started doing a book. So not only could I not find a publisher to support any of this, I had to find a way to do creative fundraising to offset costs. So a lot of people find something like this daunting or too overwhelming and probably would just give up. So doing a book for a country where nothing was known about and trying to get original art done was a humongous project. But I ended up hiring 2 other artists, and they all agreed that the originals I would get to keep after they were able to scan them, and if they wanted to use them, fine. But I was going to use the originals to sell to offset some of the cost. And so I ended up selling, I think, 57 of the originals to offset some of the production cost. Olivia's there in the right picture there. She spent a whole year working on the individual range maps for every single species in the book. My good friend Luis he's a computer whiz, never done a book in his life. So he learned all the programming. And so we had our team going, and we're on our way to doing the first bird book for Honduras. I am not a scientific writer, so I had to learn how to write for this kind of book. I had another peer who passed away a few years ago, but he helped me formulate my ideas, and was a good friend of ours with a nonprofit in Missouri, which we'll mention in a minute here. So as I mentioned, I sold more than 50 of the original plates. Here are a few of the people with a few of their original plates, very proud owners of these pieces of art in their homes. As I mentioned, I was introduced to these people that worked with a nonprofit in Missouri, the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation, and we still work with them today. And Brad, he's on the far right, he was instrumental in getting 2 matching grants approved with the Department of Conservation. They were going to match up to $30,000 in 2 fiscal years, and we were able to get $27,000 in donations to go in. That's mostly people buying the plates, and so they matched that 27,000. And so there was a huge chunk of the production costs were offset right there. So there it is. And not only did it self-publish, author and self-publish this book, but fundraise for it, worked with the artist and guiding at the same time. We did this book in 3 years from start to finish. that is one major accomplishment. It's a 550-page book with over 1,000 illustrations in it, individual range maps, and a big pull-out map in the back. So this is one of the major life accomplishments. And so in January 2015, we had this big book ceremony. About 350 people showed up from different countries, and it was a huge party that went in all day long and into the night. So as a result of this very first bird book, there was a new administration that had come into Honduras, people with a different mindset altogether. I was introduced to a couple different ministers and somebody with a chamber of tourism. And I started talking to them about bird watching and the economic impact of it, and they were just blown away. So I was able to meet the president, have numerous conversations with him, and they all loved the idea of bird watching and bringing more people in to see birds. And now we had more companies coming, Vent and Eagle Eye, a lot more companies coming, but it could have been a lot better, and the results could have been even more spectacular. But I started talking to them about the conservation part of it, that all these parks and reserves are on paper. You have to invest in these places to be able to get up to them and have trails and roads and infrastructure so people can see the birds. They really didn't like that too much. It sounded like probably too much work. And so that kind of just faded away. It was a lot of hype for a long time. I got to give them credit though for at least listening. I mean, I put my reputation out on the line, and I tried, and that's all I could do. But one thing I didn't mention is, as a kid, I was given books from my parents. There were these new books that were coming out with photographs in them of birds in North America, butterflies in North America. And so sometimes I'd even take these books to school to look at. And so having these kind of books early on in my life had a huge influence on what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so reflecting back upon that, and it didn't take long, was the idea of getting this book done in a Spanish edition. So it took Ridgely and Princeton, I think 25 years to be able to fundraise enough money from the sales of the Panama book to do theirs in Spanish. I didn't want to wait 25 years. So I got together a group of translators from Honduras, ex-Peace Corps, people in the States. There was even a classroom of high school kids in the States. I think it was like 40 translators. And we translated this book in no time flat from beginning to end, and it ended up being a 600-page book. The only thing we changed in this book is we added these two images in the very front. The left one says, "Put down your slingshots and pick up a pair of binoculars." A lot of kids, probably not as much as before, they shoot birds with slingshots. And the one on the right, there are different messages saying why they shouldn't buy birds from the wild. They just deserve to be free. That's the only thing we changed in the whole book. So we were approaching the end of translating this whole book, putting it all together, which was actually pretty quick. And I started fundraising and got enough donations. And as a commitment, I said we're going to give at least 400 books away to school kids. And so with some of my former students from the bird guide courses who lived in different parts of the country, they helped organize these big book giveaway projects to school kids. And these weren't just any school kids. All of them were all elementary schools, and most of them were in the periphery of national parks and reserves. So we had 5 big book giveaway programs. We couldn't invite all the kids because that would be too many, but almost all the teachers were there. Some of the kids and parents, sometimes local representatives of the government as well, municipalities. We ended up giving 400 books away to 10,000 school children in the country. So this was another big milestone. So to at least have this book and all the content in Spanish in libraries in all these schools. So just trying to do our part. So as we wrap up, at least on my end of doing the bird work, more than 20 years of bird work, the country list now stands at 803. So between the work that I did and now all the people have come up behind me and my former students, there are like 10 grassroots birdwatching clubs in the country, an ornithological association. Everybody else has added all of the 60 species of birds. So we're able to add over 100 bird species to the country list. So I think that's pretty amazing. So if you remember in the first slide, I was a kid with the butterfly net, and I think that was in Yosemite National Park. I decided, along with Olivia, we would take a couple steps back now that there were probably several hundred bird watchers in the country. And a lot of the people are going to kind of just take over a lot of the work that I had started. Said, I want to start going back to my butterflies. And we did back. And so we've been working with butterflies for the past 7 years. So even worse than the birds, there was almost nothing known about the butterflies in the country. The only thing we had to go off of was a published list from 2012. There were 861 species confirmed for the country on this list. And we knew there were a lot more. Next. So Liv and I went back into the field, gung-ho, again paying for all this out of our own pocket. No grants for any of this. Everywhere we went, we got country record after country record after country record. It was very easy to get 2 or 3 every single day. We went out somewhere, including our backyard. You can see we do add nets. A lot of people are against collecting, but in a country where virtually nothing was known about the butterflies and there are no collections here, there are a couple, but they're very, very small, very poorly represented collection. We needed to do our own collection to do a book. We're doing a representative collection of mostly the rarer things like skippers and hair streaks and metal marks, and then maybe a common butterfly like a mole. Maybe we would have one in the collection and that's it. But we're also photographing the butterflies as well. So within the first, I think 11 months it was, we already had 4 new species for science. That is really quick. And these are the first 2 that got published in the journal Tropical Lepidoptera out of Florida. They got published in the same issue. One is endemic to our property here at Emerald Valley. I named it after my mother. And that big purplish skipper on the right was also named after a friend's mother. So our first 2 endemic butterflies are named after moms. Next. So we're working die-hard and gung-ho on this because we wanted to do at least the first edition of the Butterflies of Honduras. And our friend Luis, our computer whiz, he whipped out a sample plate. And so there's one right there, metal marks. So within less than 7 years, we did the very first edition of the Butterflies of Honduras. The first edition, because there's probably going to be a second and another 10 or 15 years. So on the cover is featured. There are now 7 new species for science. Only 2 have been published, but there are 4 there on the cover. So there's the original record, 861 when we started. We are now at over 1,300 species. And there's almost at least another 450 species still possible to find here in the country. This one that you're seeing here, this Glamis skipper, just real quick, is one that in all of Central America, it's only known from our property and then reappears in Peru. And then we have a satyr that's found here and reappears in Bolivia. So we really don't know a lot about the butterflies in Central America in general. There's just still way too few people doing butterfly work. So as we come down to toward the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you something kind of spectacular here. So you see this screenshot of Canada and United States. we won't have anybody answer it now, but about how many square miles do you think this area is, the lower 48 in Canada? And about how many species of butterflies are found in this geographic area? Well, let's show you here in the next slide. About 7 million square miles and 725 species of butterflies in this geographic area. This is our place here. It is less than 1 square mile, and we have 755 species of butterflies. So that's not even a pinpoint on the previous map we showed you. This is our place, Emerald Valley's the International Butterfly Center. We live in the middle of the rainforest, so we get to study all these things all year long if we wanted to, but it's been a huge advantage of living here. That's why we find so many rare species. So we've kind of broken a bit the paradigm of species diversity. The further south you go, the more species you get, and that's true, but nobody ever thought that that amount of species could be found in such a small area this far north in Central America. But this got published also in the same journal, a 22-page manuscript showing how we documented so many species. So there it is. That's the first 2 pages of the manuscript. And I can send anybody those PDF files or the links to those if anybody wants to. And so stemming off of this huge diversity we have here and the discovery of this plant called the mistflower, which you have in the southern US, is we did a butterfly festival. We started doing a butterfly festival in 2020. We've planted multiple mistflower gardens and other types of flowers. And so in January, the peak bloom season, there are literally clouds of butterflies that descend into the gardens, and people can come and photograph them all day, day after day. So this January coming up to our 6th event, which is now an international festival. So here are last couple slides. As I mentioned, we're still working with the nonprofit in Missouri. So they've been helping us for many years. And those interested in sending them tax-exempt donations, they receive them on our behalf, and we're now buying lots of rainforest around us. So the only way to really conserve a lot of these rainforests is just to outright purchase them and protect them. So from the original 3 purchases, we have 50 acres. We're now up to about 67 acres of rainforest around us. So another aerial view of where we live. Next. So that concludes the presentation. There are some trips there listed so that I will be leading or co-leading on. These are all for next year. Of course, we have the trip to Honduras, 2 trips to Panama, return trip to Uganda in July, Ecuador and Colombia. And so we hope to see some of you on one of these trips. The Honduras trip features the lake area, or close to where we live. We actually don't come here to the property. Then we go to the Mayan ruins in the far western part of the country and get a great guided tour of that famous Mayan site. So if
Great.
there's,
Oh, no, thanks so much, Robert. That was fantastic. And I just wanted to say before anyone signs off, we're opening up questions in the chat box. And you can type those in. We have 2 already. I can help you field those. Jean is asking what your favorite Honduran bird is and why.
So I always answered that question with was the bird I have not seen yet.
That's fair.
So anyways, I think I've seen 740 species in the country. So there's another 60 out there, and I do see lifers still now and then. Violaceous quail dove was the last one in eastern Honduras, and it was a country record. So that was my last favorite one.
Amazing. And then we have another question. Should I buy my copy of your field guide on Amazon? Parentheses, there's one copy left in stock, or should I order it directly from you? Where do you gain the best financial benefit? You earned it.
Budio Books, the bookstore from ABA, they should still have a lot of copies left. Budio
That's
Books,
BUTEO, right?
right? Yep.
Bucks, BUCKS.com.
Budio Books.
Oh, books, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Buteo Books,
that's
BUTEO
the ABA bookstore. And the Butterfly book is through a company called Fun Adventures out of North Carolina.
Okay, perfect. Linda said, excellent program, Robert. Looking forward to being with you and Olivia at the Butterfly Festival.
That-
Um, anyone else have any questions? There's lots of familiar names here. Let's
There's,
see.
there's Paul.
Kathy said, what kind of weather to expect on February trip? What habitats on that trip?
So weather is nice. That's what we consider our springtime. So 80s, you could expect a daytime temperature, cooler at night, 70s, anywhere from lowland rainforest to pine oak forest in the Copan area. So those are the two major habitats that are visited during that trip. And the lake, well, freshwater habitat as well.
Great. Anyone else? We've got plenty of time for questions. Let's see, Robert, do you know anyone here to call out and get a question out of them?
We can ask Paul if he liked the butterflies. We know Paul liked the butterflies. He was on the Texas trip last year.
Oh, Kathy said, are you going to do dragonflies?
Oh no, everybody wants me to do the dragonflies and orchids on Honduras. There's gonna be one more butterfly book and that's it. I'm retiring from publishing. We're building our own eco lodge here at Emerald Valley. Our second cabin's almost finished. We have probably 4 more years of building to do.
Boy,
Yep.
okay, that is a lot. Anyone else? We've got some familiar faces here. Please feel free to ask some questions. I see Herb, I see Arden and Arlana. I see plenty of friends here to ask questions. Laura,
Laura was in Panama.
not to call everyone out.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, hopefully we'll see some people on some of the trips that I'll be on next year.
Good. I did
So
a trip with Robert in Arizona, and I can attest that he is an outstanding guide. That is, I can confirm that to be true.
great, thanks. I had great guides up there with James, and we'll be with Brian in November here in a couple of months.
Yeah,
Brian's
that'll be
amazing
exciting.
guide.
Amelia, actually, who has been hosting, I think Amelia will be there too, who you met last year. So that'll be a fun time, a big Naturalist reunion. Kathy said, did you choose February for the spring tour?
So again, February is usually like the springtime weather here. And so the breeding season for birds for much of Central America is February, March, and then April. And from there, they're already nesting. And so just like your spring up there, the birds are typically more vocal, a lot more, of course, the resident birds, they're singing and they're easier to spot. So that's why February is chosen, and the weather's nice, very nice. March, it starts to get dry everywhere and can get pretty warm.
Okay. Arden, Arlana, some of our favorite longtime travelers said, not a question, but thumbs up for the NJ trip in February. This trip to Honduras was fantastic. Looking forward to going back. We'll trust their judgment. Anyone else? We've probably got, 5 more minutes for questions. Okay, what was your favorite memory from your years of field work?
Oh man, I would seeing a jaguar,
Only pick one. Good luck.
face to face from the raft. I mean, that's something that'll never leave your memory. I mean, I don't know if I was to sit down and think about it, there's probably too many. Finding my very first new species for science, a butterfly,
Yeah.
finding the second one, that was almost like yesterday for me.
Where was your
Finding
face-to-face jaguar experience? Was that in the
in
country?
eastern Honduras, because
Wow.
you can raft 6 days down the river through virgin rainforest. We saw tapirs and jaguars, macaws,
Oh my God.
call white-lipped peccaries, all kinds of stuff.
That's
We don't do that.
I had
That's a
to
hard
go to
trip. We don't do
Brazil.
that anymore.
Well, I had to go to Brazil to do that, but that is amazing. Honduras sounds like it has a lot to offer. So, any more questions from our group here?
Hey, Jerry.
The microphone on.
There's-
Very, very good talk. My name is Jerry Bauer. I work for the U.S. Forest Service,
Hi,
and
Jerry.
I spent 20 years working in Central America as a Peace Corps volunteer for the Forest Service and for USAID. So we've worked with Robert for many, many years, and I just want to back up some of the things he said. Nobody has done the monumental work against great odds and at a lot of personal sacrifice, not only time and effort, but funding, as he said. Robert has really done monumental work in Central America.
Thank you.
That is amazing. Thank you, Jerry. Um, Laura Backen, who we know, she said, great trip to Panama 2 years ago. Hope to visit your lodge one of these years. Where is Butch? Hope he'd be on screen. Where's Butch?
He's over there in the other room
All right.
with Olivia.
Slide down was for Butch.
Kathy P said, thank you so much. Vincent Sherwin said, I'm pondering Honduras versus Trinidad and Tobago. Anyone able to compare the two? Robert, what do you say?
Everywhere you go is great. I mean, every single trip that this company does is for a good reason. I mean, I co-led one of the trips to Trinidad and Tobago years ago. It's a wonderful trip. You get to sit and see a lot of birds and feeders and stuff and the guan and everything. So every destination they have is great. It's hard to pick. I'm not gonna I would push Honduras because I live here because I mean there's just so many great places to go. So it's just kind of a personal decision. That depends what you want to see. And like, Honduras, we offer the Copan ruins at the end of the tour. So some people like to see the Mayan sites as well. Just like some of the Belize tours, you see some of the Mayan sites up there. So you do nature and cultural aspects as well.
It's very diplomatic. Lynn said, thank you, Robert, for all your great work and service to sharing the birds and butterflies of Honduras and protecting critical habitat, which we have to second there. And then Mike Firmer said, how practical is independent travel around Honduras beside your trips?
There are a lot of good roads. There's signage on some roads, but if you know how to work GPS and all the apps on your phones nowadays, now you have Merlin, now you have all these, eBird and everything go off. If you're an adventurous birder and you're able to do all that kind of stuff, I mean, you should speak rudimentary Spanish, though. There's not a lot of English speaking people away from the big cities. Some people do go out and bird on their own. It's safe here. I've been here 31 years, and despite what State Department warnings say, I've never been assaulted in 31 years. So that says something right there. So either on my own or with clients or doing research in very remote places, I've never ever felt threatened in any way whatsoever. Otherwise, I mean, I wouldn't be here. My mom comes for 2 or 3 months every year too, and she loves it here.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that too. The first time I went there after the butterfly trip with you, Robert, I rented a car and I had never been to Honduras and went off on my own in the rental car and felt totally safe. And it is definitely a little bit different than say Costa Rica because you do need a little bit more Spanish, I'd say, to feel a little bit more comfortable. But I mean, I never felt unsafe in any of the locations or anything like that. And just ventured off on my own.
Good. And I think that answers our latest question about safety issues when you started. Do you feel that that's where you, do you feel that where most folks travel
Yeah.
is really safe? I think you answered that there.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anything else, you guys, in our dwindling audience as we enter our nighttime? Oh, Deb, great presentation, Robert. One note for me is that on a trip with the highlands of Honduras with Robert, the reception was way better in the hills of Ohio, and hi to Vernie. That's Deb Marsh.
Great.
We know Deb.
Oh yeah, she'll be here for a butterfly festival again.
Yeah, I'll see her in January. Hi, Deb.
Bernie's coming, so we're building up a really good followers for our butterfly festival. Just a quick plug. During our festival, we see up to almost 300 species of butterflies in 5 days. That's an amazing and very easy walking in our gardens and places. So it's, anyway, just a plug for our festival.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, we still do have a few spots left for that November South Texas spot. All right, you guys, anything else before we let Robert go? Any other questions?
So my email was there, and Naturalist Journey's got my email. If anybody, again, has any other questions, or you want me to send you those PDF files on the publications or anything, just feel free to shoot me an email. We've got numerous groups and pages on Facebook as well. Some people don't do Facebook, but a lot of people do. I do post almost every single day of the year, sometimes 2 or 3 posts a day. A lot of butterflies you'll see, sometimes birds. The work and building that we're doing here at Emerald Valley as well, ongoing conservation work too. So
Great.
anyways.
And if you guys want to join the tour, you can go through the website, book your trip, or email us at travel@naturalistjourneys.com and we will get you booked on. Sounds like a great week.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see some of you people here. That
Yeah.
one day.
All right. Well, I think if that's it, you guys, thanks for tuning in. That was really fun. Thank you so much, Robert. That was wonderful. And, you know, if we get any questions, we'll follow up, and it's going to be a great week.
All right, pleasure doing this for everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed it. We'll do it again someday.
Thank you, Robert.
We will.